Welcome to people who are joining us at the moment. Sorry for the slight delay. We had a little bit of a technical hitch, but we're glad to see you joining us. We will start in just a moment. Okay, I'm conscious of time. Thank you. So we better kick off. Thank you to you all for joining us today. I'm really delighted you could join us. I'm Sarah Dance. I'm Deputy Chair of the South East Local Enterprise Partnership, and I'm co-chair of the South East Creative Economy Network. In my day job, I'm a creative producer and consultant, and I'm going to hand over to Hazel in a minute. Just to note, the webinar is being live captioned, and also there are BSL interpreters here today for you. If you wish to use the BSL, please pin them. You'll see them as BSL on the participants list. So please pin them onto your screen, and then you can ensure that they're there all the time. So without further ado, let me hand you over to Hazel. Thank you very much, Hazel.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you for that warm welcome. So my name's Hazel Edwards and I'm the Area Director for the South East as part of Arts Council England. And just by way of a bit of introduction to my own background, I've worked in museums for 25 years up in the North East, and then for 7 years leading research across arts and creative industries at Durham University, and then at Bristol at the University of West of England. And I've been with Arts Council England in this role for nearly a year now. And it's a great privilege to have this job. I'm also, interestingly, the chair of the South East Areas Towns Group, which is a body that brings together arm's length bodies, all who have stake in and are involved in the towns funds, the government towns fund. So very interested in the outcome of this report. So thank you all for attending. We're now up to 158 participants. We're delighted with that. And I think you're from a variety of organisations that embrace local authorities, universities, business improvement districts, cultural venues, freelancers, of course, creative practice businesses, local enterprise partnerships, funding bodies, destination management organisations, a whole range of organisations. And we're also delighted to have representatives from DCMS and the BBC online. I'm going to hand back to Sarah. As you can see, it's a bit of a back and forth job here today, and she's going to talk about the actual webinar session and how it's going to be run.
Thank you, Hazel. I guess it will keep you all on your toes as we go back and forth between each other. Please note, in terms of the way the webinar is going to run, it's going to be recorded, and it is an open and public meeting. And we're going to ensure that the video is up on the CELEP website post-event, and we'll obviously post links to that on social media. And we'd really like to begin a conversation with you all. This report is absolutely a call to action. It's not a sit on a shelf document. That would be the worst thing it could possibly be. So anyone with questions for participants can submit them via the Zoom chat feature, and we'll do our very best to get answers to you in the Q&A session after the break. So let me kind of introduce the report a tiny bit. I just want to say how kind of delighted that you're able to join us. And the report was jointly commissioned by CELEP and the Arts Council England and produced by We Made That. I think it's true to say that enabling and developing strategies for high street recovery has never been more important The impact of COVID-19 on the economies of our towns and in the southeast has only accelerated the significant challenges facing our high streets. Hello. Yet we have begun to see new ways of working and really innovative ideas that have been led by the creative sector and have begun to kind of change this story. So the report presents a really detailed evidence base and a clear call to action, as I said, for all of our stakeholders to take advantage of the real growth opportunity for the creative sector in our high streets. And our ambition is for the report to be a starting point for sustained action, that it might lead to further funding opportunities and projects, and that it will promote the wider strategic ambitions of CELEP and the Arts Council as articulated in CELEP in the Recovery and Renewal Strategy. So now I'm going to hand over to Hazel for a bit of an introduction from the Arts Council.
So at Arts Council, we're really excited about this publication and its tangible potential. I don't think this report is going to sit on shelves and gathering dust. It offers for the arts, culture and creativity to make a real lasting and positive change to high streets across the southeast and beyond. And of course, it's very timely today, the day that the government's Levelling Up White Paper has been published. It actually coincides perfectly with Let's Create. That's the Arts Council 10-year strategy, which we launched in January 2020, which sets out our commitment to ensuring that villages, towns and cities across this country thrive through a collaborative approach to culture. And of course, high streets are a vital part of that work. We already know that culture is playing a critical role in helping to regenerate high streets up and down the country. And that's something that we recognise at Arts Council. Our publication in August 2021 called A High Street Renaissance showed that the culture on high streets generates footfall and spend alongside creating civic pride. To date, investment in high streets is generally focused on towns, and the southeast area of Arts Council England, perhaps more than any other of the areas in the Arts Council's remit, is dominated by a diverse range of towns. It's something that I'm quite preoccupied with at the moment. So we've got market towns in the southeast, we've got a range of coastal towns, we've got aviation towns such as Crawley and Luton, which are facing new challenges post-pandemic. And we've got new towns, of course, both post-war, Second World War and 21st century new towns such as Ebbsfleet. Thanks to the Creative High Streets report, we're able to provide more stakeholders in more places with clear and actionable steps, as Sarah said, that they can take to harness creativity for the benefit of their high streets and ultimately the places in which those high streets are located and the communities that they serve. As Sarah highlighted, this is particularly timely given the incredible challenges that high streets have experienced over the past 2 years and the changes in the way people are engaging with retail offers. In short, the move that we're all making to online retail, which of course started before the pandemic, but has really accelerated over the past 2 years. Something that's unique to this report is its very practical content with a focus on a number of snapshot case studies, plus 5 longer case studies, all presenting a range of creative interventions, both high and low cost, to address live challenges and opportunities, such as the nighttime economy, vacant shops, complex property and land ownership patterns, all those wonderful heritage assets. How do we use those and refurnish them? And of course, the opportunities that Section 106 planning offers us in this work on high streets. So on that note, I'd like to hand over to Holly Lewis from the We Made That. She oversaw the report and will be able to tell us a little bit more in detail about the key findings. Holly is the co-founder of We Made That in 2006, I think an architect by training, Holly, and an expert on high street regeneration. I'll hand over to you, Holly.
Thanks very much, Hazel, and thanks everyone for being here. It's a pleasure to talk you through at a relatively rapid pace the core bits of the content of the report, but I hope that you'll also take the opportunity to download it and read it yourselves. I think the link will be shared later in the chat and also by Eventbrite after the event if you don't manage to catch it now. If we can have the next slide, please. So the report has these key sections, there's 3 of them. It's a relatively snappy report, so don't feel that you need to just hear this recording in order to understand it. Please do go and read it. We think it's accessible and will be useful to you. The first section is a call for action. This is really about why the report is needed. It's got some pretty good evidence in there, both in the main report and the appendix, that might be useful to those of you making cases for investment. But it also talks about what's special about now and what's special about here in the Southeast, and how these 2 agendas come together so strongly in the Southeast of the creative and cultural industries and high street regeneration. Creative and cultural sectors as a driver for high street rejuvenation. We think this is a kind of magical combination, and this section of the report has, as has already been described, these case studies of the examples of particularly interesting things that are happening across the region where these 2 factors come together. And finally, delivering for high streets in the creative sector. This is where that kind of practical guidance and tips sits. So that's how the report is structured. If we could move on, please. And to the next slide. So I'll just talk you through some of the very, very key findings of the call for action section. So the retraction of physical retail has already been discussed. This documented decline of traditional retail in shops, just basically needing less space now, has been documented for a number of years. In some places, that means that we've seen an increase in vacancy. In other places, it means that we've seen a diversification of what our high streets and town centres are offering. The trends accelerated by COVID-19, and this word acceleration has already been mentioned this afternoon and comes up a lot. What those trends are things like the experience economy is how it gets referred to. The idea that people are really looking for a good time rather than necessarily going to high streets to fulfill their shopping needs, because we're doing that online now. Obviously, increase in online retail. But on the kind of more negative side, perhaps the impacts of extended periods of austerity, what that's done to our high streets and town centres. And obviously, more recently, the impacts of COVID-related lockdowns, particularly on sectors like hospitality. There are some positive things that are happening right now, though. Significant central government funding through things like the Towns Fund, the Future High Street Fund, Heritage Action Zones, and the Levelling Up Fund. Thank you also for being here to hear us rather than listening to Michael Gove at the moment. So across the region, around £250 million of funding has been bid for through those programmes. And of course, the Arts Council Let's Create Vision, which has been supporting place-based funding, for example, creative people and places across the region. And this map just summarises where those are happening. There's an awful lot going on. If we could move on, please. So we know that creativity and culture have an awful lot to offer high streets, and we know that from the High Street Renaissance report for one. So 75% of Arts Council funded cultural infrastructure is on or within a 5-minute walk of a high street. But also really significantly that 62% of UK adults agree that culture on the high street gives them a sense of pride in their local area, and that 50% of them would like to see more cultural experiences on their high streets. So these are really significant figures. In the Southeast, I won't read through all of this, but just to say 4,600 businesses within 200 metres of a high street. And although that's only currently 10% of high street businesses working within the cultural and creative sector, what we see is that 18% of new startups are in the cultural and creative sector. So what that means is potentially we do see this increase of the sector in terms of its presence on high streets. And if we could move on, please. So the report has identified these 3 kind of key opportunities, both opportunities for the creative and cultural sector to be present on high streets and kind of vice versa, that high streets can offer to the creative and cultural sector. And we've grouped them in these 3 headings. So the first is adaptive and supportive. The kind of things that we've been picking up on through this theme is new patterns of work and technologies. So the idea that people are increasingly working in flexible ways from different locations, sometimes working from home, perhaps also looking for opportunities to work close to home, and that their local high streets might be a really good opportunity to support that. That the creative and cultural sector is typically made up of a large proportion of freelancers, of SMEs, of micro businesses, and that high streets are a perfect structure to support the kind of networking that those businesses really thrive on. But also for the creative and cultural sector to bring this experimentation and flexibility that's kind of inherent, I think, in the sector, that offers real benefits to high streets and town centres, particularly at this moment of increased change. Diverse and vibrant, the second category. This is really about culture and creativity, giving people a reason to visit. We know that cultural activity, events, festivals, arts installations and so on can really boost a brand of a place and can support increased footfall. And also more specific actions, for example, highlighting and supporting and rejuvenating heritage assets, again, giving people a sense of pride in their place. And thirdly, inclusive and resilient. High streets are this incredibly accessible set of places, and particularly to marginalised groups. And we know that from pre-existing research. That we've also seen that the projects and the case studies that are included in the report have been supporting access to skills and education. So we're using the high street as a way into the economy, either to the creative economy, but also to the broader economy. And there's this incredible ability for both high streets and the creative and cultural sector to support quality of life and well-being. If we could move on, please. So the creative and cultural sector is a driver for high street rejuvenation. I'm not going to talk in a great deal of detail about these, but just to say that we have these 17 case studies that are included in the report. And just to flash up to you, this is where they're located. So I won't talk about this in great detail. If we could move to the next slide. So the examples that we've included are places like this. This is Basildon, and you'll hear more about this from Lauren later in the session. But the key thing just to highlight here is that early kind of light touch, low cost activation and activity here has led to a much larger programme of an 8-year programme supported by creative people and places that we'll be hearing about more. So I won't say anything more about that. If we could have the next slide, please. And this is in Colchester, where new workspace focused on digital and creative sectors was delivered in 2017, and where a study following that delivery showed an incredibly high demand for that workspace and that more workspace is coming forward. So this is reuse of an old police station and then subsequently an old coach works for creative workspace. That's a really interesting use of those assets. This case study is particularly interesting in terms of the combination of public sector action and acquisition of potentially problematic assets, but also in the fact that it has subsequently encouraged investment into private sector owned assets such as the shopping centre nearby. And then if we could move on, please. Folkestone is one of our examples. So here a really interesting focus on creative production. So not just galleries and theatres and things that invite audiences in, but in businesses, designers who are making and producing creative and cultural work, and supporting 150 creative production businesses through high street properties. Also 20 years in the making, I think, from the founding of the trust that's involved with that. So just a reminder that sometimes this can be a long-term sort of vision. And finally, Reimagining Newhaven, a really interesting combination here of different partners and stakeholders who've been successful in securing future high street funds to deliver a really interesting combination of things, including a creative hub and workspace, but also a community supermarket and some community kitchen. And then if we could come to the next slide, please. So finally, and this will just be a very, very quick overview, and I won't speak to all of the text, but if we could move to the next slide. Some key lessons learned. So the importance of a vision, particularly this kind of innovative and creative thinking that the creative sectors can bring to our high streets, that imagination is just essential. And also that we've seen that where these projects involving culture and creativity are delivered on high streets, that there is this increased consciousness and focus on social value that can be delivered through high street interventions. In terms of operational considerations, again, I won't read through this, but just to say that we've had a really wide range of tools and activities used. So things like people using social value leases or social value lease clauses, turnover rents, or curating their tenants to suit to suit the local economy has been a really interesting thing to reflect on. And finally, we worked with our long-term collaborators, PRD, on the report, and it wouldn't be complete without saying that evidencing, monitoring and evaluating the impact of interventions is incredibly important, and that traditional forms of data capture have been perhaps shown to be too slow, and there are increasingly more and more ways that we can look at data in relation to high street performance that can support case making. And the next slide. So just some more lessons learned here. Developing a clear roadmap, knowing what it is that you want to achieve, obviously very important. And some of these questions might be key ones to consider. This is, are you targeting jobs growth? Are you targeting more visitors? Are you targeting increased footfall? But also an encouragement to consider wider impacts of high street interventions in terms of health and well-being, climate resilience, or social integration. In terms of reimagining vacant and underused spaces on high streets, we've got a whole plethora of levers of action, we've called them, and tactics that can be used. So whether that's planning, strategic work, acquisitions, funding, using the soft powers that various high street stakeholders have, but also in terms of specific tactics, meanwhile or temporary uses, innovative use of services contracts, business rates interventions, lease models, or consortium asset management, all very important. As I said, huge topics to be covered in such a short time. And then finally, reimagining the role of the sector in reinventing the high street. This is particularly thinking about a larger role for the creative and cultural sector in decision-making around high streets and advocating for increased community involvement as well. And then finally, my last slide, so that I'm not running too far over, is just some key takeaways for you. So the first is that the report, I think, put forward in a compelling way this vision for the creative and cultural uses to help to save the South East high streets. Slightly provocative language there, because they can be diverse and vibrant, because the creative and cultural sectors can support this adaptive and supportive nature of high streets, and because of this interest in inclusion and resilience that each party offers to the other. We also advocate for curating and making the most of existing assets, particularly important in terms of the climate crisis, but the report includes this whole range of ways in which the creative and cultural sectors contribute. And finally, working together, so advocating for an increased role for creative and cultural stakeholders in decision-making and strategic planning, again, for the benefit of both parties. So that is a whistle-stop tour through the contents of the report, and hopefully you can see that there's a lot more in there to be explored. But with that, I will finish the presentation. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Holly. Thank you. Some really fascinating thoughts and examples, and an outline of lessons learned so far, and ways that we can start to rethink our some of our high streets. And I'd like to also thank the many organisations and the many people who contributed to the report, three of whom are with us here today. So welcome Camilla, Paul and Lauren. First, let me hand over to Camilla Cole, who's a curator, an innovator and founder of Hyper Studios. So Camilla, welcome. Please do tell us a little bit about the amazing work of your company. Thank you.
So much. Yeah, so Hyper Studios was actually founded in a pandemic. I was a curator in my former life, worked for lots of galleries for very, very wealthy people. And when I started by myself, I couldn't work out how to get access to space. Then I looked around the sector and realized there were ways of doing this, and it was like business rate mitigation and other elements. So I founded Hyper Studios. So what we do is broker relationships between landlords and artists. We, if we go to the next slide, we work across the UK, but we do have a couple of sites. Had a site in Eastbourne we'll go into, and we've got a site in Southend coming up. But basically what we do is that we match make artists with empty spaces, and we do this through an open call. They get it totally for free, so we alleviate barriers to creativity. People can just try something new, but in return for a public program. This is really important. The idea is to generate footfall, community engagement. And every time we go everywhere, it's a very local offer. It's just for local people in the area. You have to walk to it. Again, born in a pandemic, you want to be pandemic proof. So this obviously creates new spaces of cultural community engagement and regenerates the high streets, and yeah, supporting artists and creators at a time when most needed. Again, what I realized as a curator was space was my main cost. I could do everything else, but I couldn't afford the space. Next slide, please. We've sort of gone through this. I don't want to rehash it, but you can sort of see the scale of the problem / our market size. I mean, we work in the most deprived areas in the country, and actually that's where the creativity is most needed, in need of help too, which is quite beneficial. So 12 shops a day are closing, 14.5% vacancies on the high street, 37,000 artists. Important to note here that we also now support music, theatre, poetry, all the creative arts, not just contemporary art like we used to. You can also see a huge interest in the arts. And next slide, please. When you see what we do, I think it's going to be really interesting about that inclusivity aspect. Having art in a shop totally changes everything, from sales to interactions to familiarity to engage. It's amazing what you experience by putting something in a high street. So how it works, we work with private landlords, and we also work with councils, and we work with council assets, and we also manage to broker relationships between private landlords and councils at the same time, who often want to speak to each other but don't know how to. So we partner with somebody that's got a property, and we can fill it within 2 or 3 weeks. So we get the image, we get the floor plan, we do an open call, we put it out on our networks. We've got an amazing bunch of trustees behind us from like the Royal Academy and places, so artists want to be part of the gang, so to speak. And they applied with a really short application process I'll go into. It's totally for free. They then judge that, and then we take on the lease of the property, Hypha Studios, and the artist effectively works for us when they're in the space. This enables us to take leases across the country, and many at the same time. So then we give the space to the artists, and they fulfill their duty to us, which is effectively being an artist and providing a public program. Yeah, next slide, please. This is the criteria for selection process. It's the merit of the work, really important. It has to be quite good. The quality of the public program, it's got to be of interest to the local community. And also about considered needs. So we don't want to just give this to people that can afford studios. We don't want to disrupt studios. We want to give people an opportunity to grow. And this is always judged by a local partner. So in Eastbourne, you'll see that it was judged by Joe Hill, director of the Towner Gallery. And that was amazing because he totally had a different insight as to which artist should get it and why. Next slide, please. So market adoption since 2021, basically a year ago today, but we got a charitable status in July. We've got 8 months of operations behind us, but we've had about now 1,000 applications across the UK, getting a real insight into the cultural offer in all these different towns. 8 different areas of the country, but lots of units within those towns. 145 artists selected and discovered and supported. Often never had a studio, never had a gallery, and we're giving them that platform with marketing and mentorship, and every placement we do includes like mentorship in a public program. Next slide, please. So this is our artist in Eastbourne. She was actually our very first artist, which was amazing, and it was great to go back to Eastbourne. I actually went to school in Eastbourne. And Molly actually is an artist that used to study in London, but came back during the pandemic to Eastbourne. And she was like, she didn't have a studio, she was working in a caravan. And so she applied, and she was honestly, she's an absolute gem. And, you know, this is not something that we would have discovered, thought we would discover, but there's so many of these everywhere we go. Anyway, so she got the shop unit and she did her show. She made work in there. People walked past, asked questions, totally familiar content. And as a result of this, she sold loads of work. She's got a big collector base now. She's looking to take on a gallery herself. She's been offered like 4 shows. She's got, you know, the one-on-one mentorship means that she's like sidetracked having to do a master's. And importantly, she's staying in Eastbourne. She's not going back to London. As far as Eastbourne's concerned, you've got like a really amazing little hub. You know, it's a very cool, young, hip artist on your high street, etc., etc. Next slide, please. I'll try to whirl through these. Councils. So we've just started working with councils. So we program their assets. In Barking, we did a series of residencies where artists came in and like did a public program with the local community, including sewing bees and like clay ceramic workshops. And Waltham Forest, we just programmed like 8 artists, a few before Christmas, a few afterwards, with like looms, teaching the community how to do looms and like, you know, 3D printing workshops, all sorts of things. Again, application based and a fee on a monthly basis. Next slide, please. So in terms of money, there's 3 ways we get money. We get money from like the Arts Council, thank you very much. We get it from private donations, which is great, and also from landlords. They donate based on the business rates that we save them. And this is a really, really decent model. It's worked for us very, very well, and it depends where you are, how much you can get. To be honest with you, the site in Eastbourne doesn't bring very much in. We don't do it for the money. It's really about the visibility and getting that sort of presence. Next slide, please. And yeah, finally, this is the sort of traction that we've had. We've had like, this shows the need. We've had 400,000 people on our website trying to find these applications and processes. And if anybody wants to work with us, please get in touch. We'd love to work with councils, landlords, anybody to try and fill these empty spaces with artists. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Camilla. That was so interesting and very pertinent to hear that the important brokering role that you've been playing between private landlords, councils and creatives. I'm going to introduce the next speaker. It's Paul Cowell from Medway Council. Welcome, Paul. He's Head of Culture and Libraries for Medway Council and has been in that role for the past 2 years. Before that, he worked for Southwark Council. He's going to talk to us about Chatham Intra High Street Action Zone, which stretches from Chatham to Rochester. And I've actually had the pleasure of walking along that street with Paul and his colleagues. So I'm very interested to hear your presentation.
Thanks, Hazel. I've not got a PowerPoint for you, so I thought I'd chat a little bit about the aspirations of Medway Council and our communities in terms of the regeneration and kind of the future of Chatham, including Chatham Intra, where our High Street Heritage Zone is. So Medway has been a centre for creative excellence for really many years. But here we started to look at culture not just defined by museums and galleries and theatre and performance, but looking at it in terms of heritage and tourism and food and nighttime economy and creative industries that really do reflect the diversity of Medway's people and the value of the creative impulse of everybody in Medway. So, and what's really interesting for us is when we won the High Street Heritage Street Zone Award, literally off the back of that, we had a future high streets investment into Chatham Town Centre of 9 million. And then in October, we won some levelling up money. So we won 14.5 million to go into a cultural package in Chatham that included the refurbishment of the Brook Theatre here, creating new creative workspace at Chatham Historic Dockyard, and a new venue being led by the University of Kent called the Docking Station. So there is at the moment significant investment in Chatham as a place. It's a really live area at the moment in terms of funding and development happening. But it's really important that we were able to really set out, that we are really able to set out our what the future is for Chatham, what its creative future is. But we wanted to make sure that we have a coherent approach to this as well. In planning terms, in terms of physical infrastructure, but also and smart technology and looking at what things are like in 10, 20, 30 years, urban design, all those sorts of things. But actually, fundamentally, it was about our residents. It's about our residents and our communities. It's about health and happiness and well-being and how all this converges and this physical investment, how we can make that work. What's really exciting is this all really started, the journey for us started back in 2019 when we started to develop our new cultural strategy. And it was played out to be a real game changer for us. And the important thing was that we made a decision very early on that this wasn't a council strategy, but this strategy had to have community ownership. And with the support of Arts Council, with some funding and the council, that we managed to open out the conversation to a broader set of people as possible. To really reflect the communities of Medway, and consultation and engagement was really at the heart of the strategy. So it brought together artists and makers and storytellers and cultural influencers and community organisations, really, and set them up as agents for change. And the level of interest and commitment and excitement around the strategy as it evolved and as it crystallised has led to a number of successful funding bids and initiatives across Medway, which has been really amazing to see. And, you know, some prime examples of that are Ideas Test, the Creative People and Places organisation here in Medway and Swale is now part of the MPO family. And there has been a growing confidence within the creative community here. And we expect to see many organisations bidding for NPO status when that opens fully later this year. What was really important about the strategy and how the strategy emerged is now it is in a suite of strategies and programs across Medway that include our local plan, our regeneration economic strategy, the skills and employability plan for Medway. So internally, really, really amazing to see culture and placemaking and creativity-led placemaking in that mix, that really high-level mix of strategies, but also how it plays out with our partners and those programs. So, you know, CKEN and the Thames Estuary Growth Board and Creative Estuary, and obviously the Arts Council's Let's Create strategy as well. So how it played into that is proving to be really, really important for us. Chatham Intra and the Heritage High Street Action Zone was absolutely fantastic in setting out different ways of working. And what is an obvious outcome of that programme is that we have to capitalise on Chatham's unique assets, the inspiration, the potential in creating public spaces, places, events and activities. And I'll always go back to promoting residents' health, happiness and well-being. It's absolutely vital. So we need to understand more, and we need to develop this overarching vision and ambition that really shows what is local and what is unique and of really special value to our residents and our visitors. We are looking at Chatham as a creative centre, a creative city. You know, understanding, we all understand the kind of broader impact and the broader value of culture and creative industries. And I think that Medway Council now is a really, really strong advocate for culture and creativity. We now feature strongly within the regeneration agenda, economic agenda, health and well-being, environmental agenda, all looked through the lens of culture, and that's really important. And in Chatham Intra, culture is not only used as a lever for regeneration, but it's also seen as a way to commercially support diversification on the high street at a more viable level. So we have seen recently over the past 12 months, during this crazy time we've been living in, is independent retail outlets opening, whether they be bakers or shoe shops or recycled clothing shops. We've started to create an energy in an area, or the partners have started to create an energy in the area that is independent and creative and really adds to that diversification that we all believe is needed. We've always got to remember that residents and visitors are the ultimate users of all this money in the infrastructure we're putting in. And we are really clear that at the heart of our ambitions is about creating sustainable and excellent places to live, to work, to experience culture and leisure. And it's not just a focus on design and land use and physical infrastructure, but it's all those things together. You know, we can have glass and concrete and, you know, bricks and mortar, but it's the people that really matter. And just, we feel at the moment that we are really well placed to lead that local action and to achieve kind of outcomes around culture and placemaking, but importantly, helping and supporting and enabling our residents and visitors to identify with Medway and with Chatham, and to really understand and appreciate and, I guess, engage with it at a level where they feel a sense of belonging in this place. And that is complicated and that is difficult, but that's where we're aiming for. Thanks.
Thank you, Paul. That's great. And it's really, you know, it just shows how the opportunities and funding exists, but how important a cohesive, community-based, but inspirational vision is to enabling things to happen in an area. And huge thanks to you for all the work you do in Medway. Lastly, but by no means least, I'd like to hand over to Lauren Martin, who's co-founder of Things Made Public. Lauren, I believe you've worked in PR and marketing for many years, but you've brought your expertise and your inspiration to enable and champion work in public spaces. So over to you. Thank you, Lauren.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me today. It's an absolute blast. So as said, I'm Lauren. I'm the co-founder of Things Made Public. For those of you that don't know us, we're an arts organisation. We specialise in cultural placemaking and creative enterprise, and we work on both strategy and delivery work across London and Essex. Sarah and I co-founded Things Made Public about 10 years ago, and we've always been a bit obsessed with high streets and how culture can be integrated within them to bring benefit to the community, whilst also tackling those issues for public, private and third sector organisations. We come from Bonnie Romford, I'm sure some of you may know it, and it's a place that's blessed with 5 shopping centres and quite a bustling high street. And when we were growing up, there was quite a limited cultural infrastructure. So as we developed Things Made Public, it was almost second nature that we started looking at the high street for opportunities, locations, people, ideas and funding. I think we found our particular way of working by accident, probably a little bit of blagging, making it up as we go along. But after a few pop-up exhibitions and events in these sort of high street spaces and getting to grips with them, that's when we started to understand, you know, the rates mitigation, but also the benefit there was to businesses in regards of improved footfall, dwell time, marketing opportunities. And we realized we had to start being a bit more vocal about what cultural activity can do for the economy of a place. Oh, next slide, please. By being a little bit more vocal, we were approached in 2015 by the landlords of the Quadrant Shopping Arcade and asked to try and revitalise the centre. As you can imagine, it was quite exciting for the young whippersnappers that we were. The Quadrant was a 1930s shopping arcade, but it was suffering from a vacancy rate of 42%, which was catastrophic, really. We worked closely with the landlords and the remaining businesses, as well as the community, to start developing and implementing a 3-year multifaceted regeneration program, which included the likes of rebranding, creative enterprise opportunities and residency programs. By 2017, the Quadrant was a hub of independent and creative businesses, and the vacancy rate had gone down to 11%. So from 42 to 11, we were pretty happy with that. And it housed recording studios, an education film hub, a training fashion facility. I think the proof in the pudding for this, in terms of that really close relationship between culture and the economy, the local economy, is the fact that this uplift encouraged Travelodge to come in as an anchor, who developed a 65-room hotel in the unused office space. So that was a real win for everyone involved. We got our culture, they got their anchor, so win-win. And I just wanted to touch on the Retailery, which again, a closed space on the high street. It was an old nightclub. It had been shut down by the police. It had been sat empty for 3 years. And this was something we worked on in partnership with the London Borough of Havering and Greater London Authority, bringing back all 364 square metres of space back into use with creative business and cultural hub use. From a cultural point of view, we were able to support over 400 creatives, individuals and organisations, and hosted 520 cultural events. I was loving the programming back then, as you can imagine. But from the business side, 40 businesses were incubated within that space. We created 68 new jobs in Havering. And what was really exciting was, as the businesses went through their steps, they went on to open their own premises in the borough. So that was a vintage tea room, an American diner, an accountant's. There was a lot of them. It was great. But moving now on to Basildon, next slide, please, which I'm sure you're all really excited about. This is what features in the report. And I think I'm really excited about this report and seeing the ideas and methodologies that we thought we were winging, we were just trying, we were seeing what happened, and seeing them being tried and tested by other organisations like yourselves, seeing similar wins and benefits. I think we can all agree there's a pattern emerging, and our work is not in vain. Like I say, with Basildon, I think all of the projects just show how organisations like us can bridge the gaps between high street activity, local economic growth and culture. For me, the pivotal point in Basildon was getting the public, private, third sector organisations on board with us right from the very start and building that trust with the community alongside. Research was also absolutely key, and this is what Holly touched on, in terms of these sort of low cost things at the beginning. So in 2018, we launched a light touch 3-month programme of action research to test activity and what people wanted, but also what stakeholders were thinking, their confidence in culture activation. So as you can see in the top left picture, that was amazing. It was called Culture Club. We programmed 183 hours of free cultural activity. We had 1,000 people through the doors. We reached over 50,000 people online. And it was this work that really, really enabled us to start making that plan and begin building those partnerships with the third, private, public communities that I mentioned earlier, which enabled us to bring that diverse range of stakeholder voice and community voice together for transparent conversations. it was together, and I think again this collaborative approach is key, that we assessed the physical assets of the town centre. We were looking at public realm, civic space, education facilities, neglected spaces, what new developments were on the horizon, and that enabled us as a group to seek out ways to grow culture whilst, which is really important, working towards that robust economic framework that also ensures you're benefiting the high street, local businesses, etc. This work wonderfully paved the way for the development of our application for the Creative People and Places application funding, of which we're lead organisation. And in 2019, thanks Arts Council, we were successful in attracting £1.7 million of funding, supplemented by a further £750,000 in cash funding from town partners, and to date around £1 million in-kind support. I know some of my Basildon gang are in the audience, so hats off to you too, guys. To date, the co-creation projects that we've delivered off of that Basildon plan, that original Twinkle in Our Eyes, has seen 650 hours of free experimental meanwhile cultural programming across 7 vacant units, which is called Open Labs, which you can see that was a wonderful project, the Rainbow Shop. Yeah, that was great. That was just one of them. We've also installed 8 large, ambitious, I would say, murals, which were all created through co-creation with local groups. Within that, we've created the largest carbon absorbing mural in the UK. And we were really, really lucky to receive additional funding from the Creative Estuary. Emma, I think you're in the room, so thanks to you, which has also enabled the development of a VLR for Basildon. And last but not least, we've managed to animate 22 locations within the town with over 400 performers as part of the Newtown Sounds Festival, which we started in 2019 and were able to run again in 2021. So the future really does look bright for Basildon. We've got a great new programme director in place for the programme. There's lots going on. We're working on cementing our partnerships and building our consortiums. And yeah, I just think it goes to prove what a little twinkle in your eye can achieve with the right people around the table. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Lauren, for that wonderful presentation. And I've had the pleasure of joining Lauren and the Basildon gang, looking around at what's been happening in Basildon. And I think it's interesting to note the synergy across so many projects that possibly have been working in isolation, but also the importance in the planning stage around auditing your assets, and also experimentation and being quite agile with projects in the early days. And the other takeaway for me is to think about high streets as places of creative production as well as consumption and experience. So lots to think about. So what we need you to do as participants is to pose your questions using the Q&A part of the chat. And at the moment, we've only got 2 questions, and I can't believe that is representative of where we are with the presentations now. So we're going to take a 10-minute break. Please use that as an opportunity to put your questions into the Q&A, and then we'll return in 10 minutes. So that will be at 2 o'clock, and we'll work through those questions and invite our panel back to answer them. Thank you very much for your attention so far. So welcome back, everybody. And just to reassure you that it's very busy behind the scenes here, organising your questions and your comments. Thank you very much for feeding those through, and to acknowledge that we have got a team behind us supporting our this webinar. So thank you very much to colleagues. I'd like to kick off with a provocation to the panel members. And it's drawn on some research that I've been listening to from Southampton University into the impact of the various towns funds on high streets and town centre renewal. They observed that decision makers are often drawn from a narrow demographic and are sometimes unrepresentative of diversity of the local communities. And this can mean, they suggested, that there is a risk that conceptualising projects is narrow and repetitive. So my question to the panel members is this actually borne out in the South East projects and your lived experience? And what have you done to mitigate against this? Are there things that we could perhaps do better? So in front of me, I've got Holly, Lauren and Camilla, and I think you're going to answer that provocation. Thank you.
Oh, shall I start? I don't know. It's all very formal. I think, like, obviously the project I spoke about, Creative People and Places, is underpinned by local people making the decisions, co-creating activity, being part of that, you know, the driving force, or being the driving force, not being part of it. I think it's something that every organisation that I know of is working hard to address in the ways in which they can. And I think the best thing that we're all doing is continuously looking, reviewing, seeing what opportunities that we can spread out there, and also making sure that we're continuously on our own backs, like doing this. Like, you know, like I mentioned, Sarah and I are a female-led organisation. That was tough, like, you know, so I think like there's lots we can be doing. I think we're all trying, and I think it's a very valid point. But I think co-creation for me with communities and getting and speaking to those communities is the key point. Like that's what I would say.
I mean, I can add a bit. Hazel, I think you're on mute, but I'm not quite sure where you were steering to, but I could say a little bit about this too, because I think that the challenge is absolutely correct. And I'm not surprised to hear the findings that you read from that report. That sounds like my experience of working in these on these projects and in these environments. And I think the challenge about inclusion goes to all levels of this kind of high street intervention. I think we have to look at ourselves, and certainly I come from a profession that is painfully male, painfully white, painfully middle class, and there's issues of inclusion across that we need to be addressing. And we made that. We're running programs ourselves to try and address that, but it also goes to how we engage externally. And I think that's what Lauren's also referring to, is that we're making sure that we're engaging proactively in an inclusive and accessible way as much as possible, and yeah, to keep challenging ourselves to do better. But sadly, it, like I say, it does kind of represent my experience, so I think it falls back to us to keep pushing for better achievement on that front.
Thank you. Camilla, do you want to add some thoughts?
Yeah, I think because we operate slightly differently, we go to the area. So we tend to get a big pool of lots of different people, and we fortunately do take into diversity into consideration. So, you know, the whole minority ethnic proportion of people that we've worked with and supported is actually fairly high, I think, because we get to the grassroots level and actually we give access to sites that people don't normally have access to. The fact that it's free is also very helpful too. So in that regard, yeah, we could always do more, particularly in our staff members, but in terms of who the artists we're supporting, I think we're doing okay.
Thank you. Can I just encourage people to upvote on the Q&A? We've probably got more questions here than we're going to be able to get through to, so we want to make sure we ask the ones that are really sort of burning for you. But I just wanted to ask the question that's sort of being posed here, and maybe perhaps go to Camilla and then also to Paul about some of the issues about private landlords. And the big retailers as well. So what's your experience about that? And actually, there's also, Stephen asked whether there was actually an issue about empty high street shops, and whether the private landlords were actually seeing more money in property development, turning the sites into homes rather than anything else. So Camilla, perhaps, and then it would be interesting to hear from a local authority point of view as well.
So in terms of getting access to landlords, initially I wrote about 1,000 letters. It was a very painful process, very expensive and stamped. But then we just got one case study. And when you've got one case study, you can go to the other landlords, or you go to agents, or you can go to bids, or you can go to councils, and they all help you because they can see it in action. You just need one example that everyone can get and rally behind, and doors open up massively. In terms of bigger landlords, ESG is a major thing. I don't think all landlords are horrible. This is a massive thing we need to remove. We need to work with landlords. We don't want to work against them. They want to see culture as important and valuable. And I think I really would say that they're not our enemy. If anything, they're meant to be our allies. So like, I think if we can work together, we'll be in a much better position. And a lot of landlords love culture. So that's good. Property, art, same thing.
And I think from a local authority perspective, the strategic principles that we put in place can be used as planning levers, and that's a really important position for local authorities to be in, to be recognising culture and creativity and cultural infrastructure as part of community infrastructure levies and Section 106, to be able to lever that into programmes. But I absolutely agree with Camilla, this happens on lots of different scales in lots of different places, from the the mass voids that Debenhams have left in many of our city centres and kind of department stores, through to individual retail units, either within shopping centres or external to that. And I think, property ownership is complicated in itself. I agree. I think there are layers and layers of property ownership that sometimes take months and months to work through the letting and subletting to find out who the ultimate owners are, who are sitting on property. I think the council local authorities have really interesting compulsory purchase opportunities that can come into play if certain properties are able to be used for significant better use and have been left unused for many, many years. So there are lots of different levers that local authorities can use to kind of open those doors to those. But I think the first and foremost, and again, agreeing with Camilla, it's about the relationships that you have with those property owners and building those, because absolutely right, a lot of them love culture. They want to see active spaces. They want to see footfall. They want to have decent, viable businesses in their spaces. And that is always the first step. And then there are things you can do later down the line if things just start moving and shifting. And that's where kind of enforcement and kind of more legal ways can help pursue ideas and thinking.
Great. Now we've got a very specific question here, and I think it's for Lauren, about carbon reducing murals. Can you pick up on that one, Lauren? And I know that somebody's put a link in the Q&A
and that link is correct. So well done, whoever did that. Yeah, so we actually were very lucky to be sponsored and work with Grafenstone on that particular mural. So the whole mural in itself was chosen by local people. They voted on it. They wanted to talk about environment, and obviously that's in our head, that's key to be doing everything we can to be representative of that. So Grafenstone have got a lime-based paint, which they very kindly let us use, and it reduces air pollution and it never really stops absorbing CO2 fumes. So it was really, really new sort of what's the word I'm looking for, like material, that's the word I'm looking for the artist to use, Insa, who did it, and he had to change his whole entire way of working to be able to utilize this paint. But yeah, it's fantastic, and I really highly recommend looking up the I sound like I'm plugging them now, but looking up their link and having a look, because they're really great team.
Thank you. So there's another question, maybe perhaps start with Paul and then come on to who else would like to answer it, which is about what are the most effective ways to engage with residents and the public at the early stage of a project?
Oh, now there's a question. Early on, so I'm going to use the cultural strategy when we started that process. There was already a set of engaged, the creative community was already engaged generally and convened regularly. But at the start of the cultural strategy, we knew we wanted to open the conversation out to as many people as possible. So, and that was about using all the contacts that not just I had and we had as the local authority, but all our community contacts to get that invitation to that conversation. And we started off in a massive room using the open space technology, the technique of open space, to really give ownership of the conversation to the community and to individuals. And it was a really important tool. I'd only ever seen it work on relatively small scale, but there were 150 people in the room. And once you get through the kind of, what is this, how does this work, the energy in the room was absolutely palpable. And people coming out of that morning session in a really big room that we have. And the conversation did not stop then, and it hasn't stopped since. What we have done is, obviously understanding, going back to an earlier question about diversity and reflecting communities, is we were really clear that we would always be looking at ourselves into whether we're reaching the right people and getting all the different points of view that are out there. So we did do some very specific outreach work, going out to meet communities and organisations and working with organisations that worked with diverse sections of our communities and residents, and working with them to reach out as well as people coming to us. I would thoroughly recommend Open Space as a tool to start a conversation, because it is very, very much led by the people in the room and not by an agenda set by somebody else.
Thank you. Lauren, you've got your hands up as well, I see.
Yeah, sorry, I'll try and lower it now. I was trying to get down with the technology. I think there's really something to be said about building trust and confidence in the communities in which you're working in, the places you're working in. And I don't think that happens overnight. Like, even when we were doing our work in Romford, I was born, bred, everything in Romford, went to school there, like it was, you've still got to build trust and trust in what you're trying to do. So I would say, like, from our point of view, like, I think it's important to meet people where they are, like, it's, where are people on their journey? Like, where is their cultural confidence? Like, what are their issues? Because sometimes, we can wax lyrical about the benefits of culture, but actually all, Tracy up the road's trying to do is keep, a roof over her head and wants the lift to be working. Like, so how do we make culture and things like that the answer, and how do we take them on that journey? And I think I always bang on about journeys, but that journey is really important to take people on and make sure they're always there feeding in. The final bit as well is, I suppose, with consultation is, like I say, the definition of culture. Like, something we did face in Basildon is we'd say, oh, what are your thoughts on culture? Nah, it's not for me, that culture. No, and so then it's almost like, oh, so do you listen to music? Do you go to the cinema? And then all of a sudden the conversations start rolling, and people, and again, I think that comes down to cultural confidence and trust. So I think it's about the organic process. I think it's about being open and transparent. And I think, most importantly, meeting people where they are and, taking them on the journey.
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, so just one thing is just, I think actually the idea of intervention and less consultation sometimes helps too. Like, we never get any notice in where we go. We just jump right in. And I think the element of surprise, people love stuff happening in empty shops. You go past and people are always like, what's going on? What's going on? And I think the fact that it's just being used half the time is good enough. And the fact they can just walk in because it's free is great. So I think sometimes that letting it sort of naturally happen, where people can just walk past, instead of, a lot of the reporting that has to happen, I think you can often just jump in, and some people just happen to come across it and really enjoy it, as long as it's obviously not sensitive to what you put in the space. It has to be something that the public would enjoy, but that's up to the locals to decide. So yeah, just an additional comment.
Great, thank you for that, Camilla. I think that sense of meanwhile space and being quite agile is a strong strand in across all the projects. So the next question, which seemed to receive a few votes, was to think about those anchor retail outlets such as Debenhams and Marks and Spencer's. I think somebody mentioned those in relation to Basildon, and somebody else has mentioned Sainsbury's in Clacton. So I'm wondering, Holly, if you can frame that, and then perhaps Camilla can come back on that one as well.
Yeah, I think that wraps together a few questions that are coming forward. And certainly we see and have seen through the case studies that are being highlighted in the report that there is obviously this need also for longer term strategic thinking about high streets and town centres, and that creativity and culture can absolutely be a part of that process. For example, in Basildon, we, in a separate commission, were commissioned by the council there to work on a town centre regeneration strategy that's been adopted. So I can confirm that there are longer term plans for both the M&S and Debenham sites that, in Basildon specifically. Clacton I don't know about, but I would imagine that there are. But I think that absolutely has to play into it. There was also a question about whether this sort of prospect of longer term, larger scale development is almost stifling, I guess, more creative, shorter term opportunities. And I think that we I mean, I think that there is an element of that, an element of truth to that. And this is why we are particularly concerned about things like permitted development, change of use from Class E. I mean, we can get technical about it, but there are processes which are being brought in at the highest governmental level that change how uses are controlled on high streets that are, I think, very concerning. And the introduction of residential, I think, means that nothing else will ever happen there again. And that's one of the wonderful things about high streets and how they work, is that they can sort of shift and change. And, you know, it used to be a butcher, baker, candlestick maker, then it becomes nail bars and creative cultural uses. So I think approaching residential with a huge amount of caution is something that we, you know, is a sort of baked into our approach to looking at high streets and town centres. I'm going off on various different tangents that I find in the question, but hopefully that helps a bit.
And from just to follow on from that, so yeah, we were going to potentially work in the M&S in Basildon, but again, what we do is that we never want to rile the places we go into, so we always have meetings with councils first. So if there's anything going on behind the scenes and it's like a nest we shouldn't touch, we obviously don't go forward with it. It's always in collaboration. But talking about large spaces, we worked with RCKA architects who work in the Southeast on a major cultural hubs model for exactly these enormous buildings, which would also have free studio space, free makers space, free performance space where you could bring new performers in. So there are various models that you can use for these larger sites, but in particular, we have Peacocks right now. It's 6,000 square foot, and we've got a 28-person collective in there who are using it as like a studio space, and they're doing a show about post-capitalism, etc. But you know, there are ways and means for people to fill these sites, no matter how large, I think. Just like.
Thank you. There's a question about how the work, this work and the report has dovetailed with the Welcome Back Fund. Holly, maybe you could speak to that, and whether also there was a part of that question was whether if any activity presented today has been also supported through spend through that through this project. So maybe Paul, you could come on to that as well. So let's start with Holly.
So I think I was racking my brains thinking about it, and I think actually that a lot of our case studies slightly predate the Welcome Back Fund because it's been a while in the making. But I can totally see how there's kind of complementarity between some of the ambitions of the Welcome Back Fund and this fund. I suppose I should have said also that the Levelling Up Fund, at least round one, specifically mentioned community and cultural infrastructure as a kind of channel of investment. So there are complementarities, I think, with central government funding that's coming out and the sort of aims and ambitions of this report. There was also very quickly a question that I could wrap in about the High Streets Task Force. So I'm on the High Streets Task Force. There's no official relationship between the report and that. But again, I think there's complementarity between other organisations and groups who are working to support the future of our high streets and town centres.
And in terms of Welcome Back projects and programmes, certainly in Medway, we have we've absolutely led on several creative programmes that have been funded through Welcome Back. We predominantly, during Welcome Back funding round one, where we were all still stuck at home, we commissioned, I think, 27 pieces of public art by 8 different artists across our streets, celebrating our frontline workforce, celebrating kind of community. So, and that's called the Rainbow Effect. You can find details on the website. And we're currently using the current round of Welcome Back Fund for another series of public art pieces across kind of shopping centres and retail centres across Medway. It's the money can only be spent for temporary use as well, which is a really interesting concept when we were looking at public art. So they may disappear, they may not, depends what the weather's like, I presume. Yeah, but hopefully they'll be there for quite a while.
Great, thank you. There's several questions which I think we can bring together around the use of high street space for skills development and incubation space for emerging creative practice and sole traders. And also perhaps you can slot in the notion of apprenticeships as well. So again, perhaps Holly could frame that answer and then we'll see who else might want to respond from the panel.
I can just give a very short answer, which is that there's lots of examples in the report of case studies that do just this. And I think it's a really great opportunity. It's one of the key reasons I think that the creative and cultural sectors have so much to offer to high streets. But I think we've got people on the call who've actually been doing it. So maybe we should hear from Lauren.
Over to you, Lauren.
This unmute button is stressing me out. So with I think, like, obviously with the example we gave of the retailery, which isn't contained in this report, like that was really groundbreaking for Romford, like in terms of giving over space that was affordable, that like, and it wasn't even necessarily the space, it was creating that gang, you know, like it was a microeconomy. They were sharing skills. They were, you know, we had everything from, you know, your accountants through to web developers, through to model makers, through to dressmakers, you know, so like there was web developers, you know, they were all sharing skills and doing things. And I think for us, that was a real eye-opener, because before we'd always sort of gone down the route of, oh, they must just be creative spaces. Actually, bringing those different skills together was incredible. We're now, like, as part of the Basildon project, we are exploring opportunities for a space such as that in Bilford, Basildon. I don't know where Bilford is. There's a whole new place, which is really, really exciting. And that's really cool, because it's working with South Essex College, it's working with ACE, obviously, it's working with Basildon Council, it's working with multiple partners, like talking to different letting agents, landlords, and everyone's really hyped about it. So I think that is, from my experience, if you're talking about breaking down barriers to culture, which is something we're passionate about, you place these spaces on your high street and all of a sudden they become a little bit less scary, a little bit more accessible, and people, you know, it's like that kid on the dance floor, you know, like a couple of steps in before they run in and they're doing, I don't know, a head spin to Agadoo, you know, it's a really great model to get people doing things.
Great. Camilla, did you want to contribute?
Yes, please. I would just follow what you're saying. You're absolutely right about that kid on the dance floor. Like when we operated in the shopping centre, we had 5 units, and one of them, they were AR and VR artists. And this shopping centre, like, these kids have never seen this sort of technology before, and suddenly they can just go in and try a headset in on it, or like dance in front of a thing, and you've got like whole communities, like whole families enjoying this new technology which they didn't have access to before. And you know, this area that they're in is actually, like, in Bristol we're talking about this time, and there's a big tech hub. So then you might have kids going, oh, actually that is for me, I'm going to go and try that. And you know, the artists that we place have to give a public program, so they bring kids in and teach them about it. And they also get a mentorship with like an incubator potentially, and they have this unit for a year, so they can do lots and lots of sort of programs like this just from the bottom up. But yeah, it's really, really cool to have it in the public sphere.
Thank you both.
I think we probably better draw the questions to an end. Thank you to you all for posing those questions, and you know, do feel free to get in touch with us at CELEP or at the Arts Council if you have other queries that you want to pose. And I really sort of just said at the beginning that a report like this is of no use if it sits on a shelf gathering dust. Setting out and actioning next steps is really equally important to the publication of the report. And so CELEP and the Arts Council England are really eager to ensure that this report leads to tangible action. So let me kind of just give you a bit of a starter for some of the things that we're going to do. Firstly, I'd really like to take this opportunity as Deputy Chair of CELEP to reflect on the really, really positive joint working between my organisation and the Arts Council England on this commission. We absolutely see this as the start of a productive, longer term relationship where our organisations can hopefully collaborate on a range of initiatives to promote and grow the creative and cultural sector across the entire South East region. And I'd also really like to recognise the wider work of CELEP in supporting the creative and cultural sector, and how this report really aligns with our wider ambitions. So we'll ensure that the findings of this report are considered throughout the South East Creative Economy Network, and we'll also ensure that it feeds into the current thinking of current and future projects, such as the South East Creatives Workspace programme. The reality is that CELEP has a role and a significant platform for strategic facilitation, and we're really keen to ensure that this is fully utilised. So So this event and the associated report will be shared as widely as possible, and will include ensure that it's shared with our working groups across the region. We're also conscious that the government is announced today the Levelling Up white paper, but so we'll ensure that the findings of this report inform CELEP's response to it. Despite the common fallacy that we are the rich Southeast, the reality is that there are many deprived places in the Southeast, particularly along the coast, that haven't yet benefited from the creative sector-led regeneration on the high street. So there is work for us all to do. And of course, none of this would have happened without partnership. So we continue to welcome suggestions for actions following the publication of this report from wider stakeholders, including you all here today. To that end, we'll be sending out a survey at the end of this session. And it just remains for me to thank Hazel and to all of you for coming. Hazel, I'm just going to hand over the final words to you.
Thank you very much, Sarah. And to just echo your ambitions for Arts Council and CELEP to work in partnership going forward, we definitely support that, and we'll be exploring that with you going forward. I just wanted to use this opportunity to tell you a little bit more about Arts Council's place-based approach to creativity. So last year we announced 54 priority places across the country where there's an opportunity for us to collaborate with key stakeholders like local authorities, the cultural sector, organisations representing community interests, a lot of the organisations that we've been hearing about today. We've actually got 10 priority places in the Southeast, and this report and what we've heard today features 3 of those: Medway, Dover and Basildon. And I think that this report offers us at Arts Council, as we develop those priority places, as a really useful blueprint. So thank you so much for the work on the report and for its amazing content. What I want to do is finish with 2 statistics, and I think these are two statistics that Holly has already shared with us, but I think they're really interesting. So while only 10% of high street businesses in the Southeast are currently in the creative sector, 18% of new businesses on the region's high streets are creative. So what we're really seeing is a great creative renaissance underway. And it's a very exciting moment for us all to be reimagining our town centres and our high streets, particularly on the day that the Levelling Up white paper is published. So just to add to my thanks to all of the panelists, to the backroom team, and especially to the participants. I think we've still got 141 online. Thank you so much for engaging with this webinar and posing such thoughtful and provocative questions. And we'll close the session now. Thank you.